Hi guys, my name is Caitlin and I'm one of your student host teachers today, and I cannot wait to tell you about the Romantic era. And this is honestly probably one of my favorite eras of classical music, which it's not technically classical, but in our brains as musicians we just tend to classify it that way. So we're going to learn a lot about it in a little amount of time, so just bear with me. What exactly is the Romantic era? The Romantic era spread from the beginning of the 1800s into 1910. So if you think about it, this era happened to go through a lot of different wars throughout the world. So when they talk about it being romantic, it's not necessarily holding hands or, super lovey-dovey music. Not that there wasn't, because there was. But this music is extremely expressive, and it also happens to deal with a lot of different emotions and different ideas. This is also known as Romanticism. This is something you may have heard about. If not, then I'm excited to tell you about it. Romanticism is another subculture of art, and here's a little art picture on the side. This isn't something that's extremely famous, but this particular era, a lot of different people, they call it fine arts, different writers and painters, people started taking photography around this time, and a lot of emotions were put into the music and the art and the literature. And when I say they're diving deeper into themes emotionally, you'll be able to tell what I'm talking about. And a lot of these songs you probably already know. So when I play them, you're gonna recognize a lot of these immediately, and it may not even, you may not even know the composer himself, but you'll recognize the song and you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, I know that song. Bear with me, guys. It's a slideshow, and I'm gonna do my best. The cool thing about the Romantic era, though, is it does follow the classical period, and I'm sure you guys just learned about that. And you could tell a lot of it, not necessarily the same, but a lot of the music follows the same structure and the same elements, because a lot of the classical music and Baroque music was written for church and different events, royal events especially, so they had different stipulations, in what could be in their music. So when we have the Romantic era coming up, all of these composers took it upon themselves to do everything bigger and better and louder and more dramatic, and you're definitely going to be able to notice. So they challenge and test every part of what classical music had set up the previous century before. Here's a list of important Romantic era composers. Now, you will definitely see these as you go throughout high school and even into college if you decide to do college music in college. I'm sure while you're reading this list, you recognize a lot of these names. So that's exciting, and I'm glad. And if you don't, then that's why we're learning. So we have Beethoven, Schubert, Berlioz, Mendelssohn, Chopin, Schumann, Liszt, Wagner. It's not Wagner. I thought it was Wagner for the longest time, but it's a German name, so the W is pronounced like a V. Little tip trick, you can go home and tell your parents about it, or whoever you live with. Tchaikovsky, who you probably either know his name or you don't, but you will after I play one of the pieces that he wrote, and I'm not going to spoil it because we'll get there eventually. Grieg and Strauss. These are all super important composers. Now, there's probably 20 to 30 more on this list, but these are the people I feel like really had an impact on the Romantic era as a whole. And we're going to go ahead and listen to some of their pieces, and you're going to learn a little bit about them through their YouTube videos. So, first up on our list is Beethoven. He is actually considered a classical and a Romantic era composer because he was born right in the middle of both of the eras. So we're actually only going to be listening to his Romantic era compositions. I only have 2 on here, but we're going to go ahead and watch a video about him first.
Illustrating history. Can you imagine a musician who can't hear? Well, that's exactly what happened to one of the greatest composers in history, Ludwig van Beethoven. He was born in 1770 in the city of Bonn, Germany. His father, a very strict man, gave him his first music lessons. At the age of 5, Beethoven showed great talent at the piano. When he was 8, he started taking lessons with the musician Christian Neef, who was impressed by Beethoven and gave him a formal musical education, enabling him to become a professional musician at the age of 11. When he was 16, he participated in a recital for the great composer Mozart, who was very impressed by the talent of young Beethoven. Although his career was promising, at home he was going through some very difficult times. At a time when medicine was very limited, Beethoven lost 3 siblings when they were still babies. He also lost his beloved mother to tuberculosis when he was just 16. His father's alcoholism worsened, and even though he was still young, he had to become the head of the household and raised his younger brothers, Caspar and Nicholas. In 1792, at the age of 22, Beethoven moved to Vienna, Austria, which was the world capital of music, where the greatest composers of the time lived. In Vienna, Beethoven studied with great musical masters like Joseph Haydn and Antonio Salieri. There, he composed all his major pieces. But when he was 26, he started losing his hearing. Obviously, this left him deeply troubled, even embarrassed, and he kept his disability a secret for many years. But even while he was going through immense suffering, Beethoven continued composing. At the age of 54, in 1824, only 3 years before his death, he composed one of his most famous pieces, his Symphony No. 9. Rumor has it that while composing it, he would lay his ear over the piano to be able to hear the notes. And while his deafness might have prevented him from hearing his own music, driven by his love for his art and commitment to his talent, Beethoven has given the world compositions that will forever touch the hearts of all mankind.
So there's that about him, and I honestly love Beethoven, and I think it's so incredible that he was able to compose one of the most famous pieces without being able to hear it. That is crazy to me, and I think that's what makes me respect him even more as a composer. Not that he doesn't deserve the respect, because he does, but just being able to overcome something that was so hard in his life. Not being able to hear music and being able to compose like that is truly a gift. So enough of my ranting about that. We're going to watch one of my favorite movements of the Moonlight Sonata. And I know you guys are in choir, and unfortunately a lot of the Romantic era stuff is more instrumental, but this is so good for your educational purposes only because this helps you branch out, and honestly, a lot of this music is super cool. There's a little bit of choral music, so don't freak out. But we're going to go ahead and watch the third movement of the Moonlight Sonata. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but just a little bit to get you a good idea. here. There were, oh, oopsies. I'm sorry, guys. I'm gonna have to go back. There we go. Sorry about that. We gotta love technology sometimes. So, continuing about the Moonlight Sonata. That was his third movement, and the first two were a little bit slower, but they're just as good. He wrote so much for the piano, but he also wrote a lot of orchestral pieces, so this next one you're going to recognize immediately as soon as I play it. I'm obviously not going to play the whole thing as well. Pause it because there's a lot of music we got to listen to. So there's just a little bit of insight on Beethoven. Our next guy, his name is Franz Schubert, and here's a video we're gonna watch about him first before we watch the Ave Maria. Here's a little background about this piece, and actually I'm gonna read you the translation. This is a little bit going into Halloween, and that's kind of why I picked it, because a lot of music happens to be in movie scores and different things. Now, I can't necessarily pinpoint if this composition is in a movie by itself, but this definitely has a lot of Halloween quote-unquote vibes to it. So basically in English, this is called The Elf King. Who rides so late through the windy night? It is the father and his child. He holds the boy warm and safe. Son, why do you hide your face in fear? Father, do you not see the Elf King with his crown and train? Son, it's just the mist. Come with me, lovely child, we'll play games. There are flowers on the beach, and my mother has golden clothes. Father, can't you hear what the Elf King is promising me? Be calm, my boy. It's only the wind in the leaves. Lovely boy, will you come with me? My daughters will wait on you. My daughters will sing and dance for you and rock you to sleep. Father, do you not see? The Elf King's daughter's there. Son, it's the old willow shining in the moonlight. I love you. I'm aroused by your beautiful form. And if you won't come, I will take you by force. Father, father, he has grabbed me. The Elf King has hurt me. The father shudders. He rides fast, the groaning boy in his arms. Anxious, he reaches the farm. In his arms, the boy is dead. So, that was extremely dramatic, and usually I don't read dramatically, but that is the English translation, and I'm going to try to keep it on the screen while you're listening to this because it is not in English, but the picture or the animation alone is going to help a lot, and honestly, I think this is a really cool piece.
Mein Sohn, was birgst du so bang dein Gesicht? Siehst, Vater, du den Erlkönig nicht, den Erlenkönig mit Kron und Schweif. Mein Sohn, es ist ein Nebelstreif. Du liebes Kind, komm, geh mit mir, gar schöne Spiele spiel ich mit dir. Manch bunter Blumen sind an dem Strand, meine Mutter hat manch gülden Gewand. Mein Vater, und hörst du nicht, was Erlenkönig mir leise verspricht? Sei ruhig, bleibe ruhig, mein Kind, in dürren Blättern säuselt der Wind. Willst, feiner Knabe, du mit mir gehen? Meine Töchter sollen dich warten schön. Meine Töchter führen die nächtlichen Rhein und wiegen und tanzen und singen dich ein. Sie wiegen und tanzen und singen dich ein. Mein Vater, und siehst du nicht dort, Erlkönigs Töchter am düstern Ort? Mein Sohn, ich seh es genau, es scheinen die alten Weiden so grau. Ich liebe dich, mich reizt deine schöne Gestalt, und bist du nicht willig, so braut ich Gewalt. Mein Vater, jetzt fasst mich an. Erlkönig hat mir ein Leid getan. Dem Vater grauset's, reitet geschwind, hält in Armen das ächzende Kind. Erreicht den Hof mit Mühe und Not. In seinen Armen das Kind war tot.
Well, you're probably like, what the heck did I just watch? So, now that you just saw that, we're going to talk about it for a whole probably 20 seconds. Basically, folklore was a huge, huge popular thing to write about in music, and I'm sure you've heard or seen some operas or different things that has to deal with like Greek mythology, and a lot of these composers really enjoyed that. And there's another composer we're going to look at towards the end who also wrote about mythology, and it's really interesting. And I know it was kind of creepy, but I had to throw that in there because it's almost Halloween season, so we have to when it's music. So this next piece by Schubert is completely different, and this one is very, very popular. It's called Ave Maria. You've probably heard it, and if not, you've probably heard it in like a funny video or something, because a lot of people use it because it's kind of sad. We're not going to listen to the whole thing, but we'll listen to a little bit of it.
Ave Maria.
That was also in Latin, if you didn't notice, but if you did, then you get an imaginary gold star. Good job. So that is Schubert, and we're going to go on to our next guy, Chopin. He is actually a crazy pianist, and we're going to watch a video about him.
Illustrating history. The work of one of the most important composers in the history of music emphasizes not only technical complexity, but the intensity of human emotion. He was considered to be a poet of the piano, the Polish Frédéric Chopin. Chopin was born in 1810 in a small village called Zelazowa Wola near the city of Warsaw. His father was French and his mother was Polish. The combination of French and Polish cultures is the strongest characteristic of his work, blending the elegance of French aristocracy with Slavic traditions. Chopin started taking piano lessons from his older sister, Ludwika, when he was little. But soon, he was taking private lessons from a famous Czech pianist, Wojciech Zilny, who recognized his pupil's great talent. At the early age of 7, Chopin was already composing his first pieces and was acclaimed in Warsaw as a child prodigy. He was a very happy and fun child. In addition to his great talent for music, Chopin was also a skilled portrait artist. Legend has it that he once surprised a teacher by drawing him perfectly during class. He was also a talented writer, but music was always his greatest passion. When he was 19 years old, just 3 weeks after completing his studies at the Warsaw Conservatory, Chopin participated in a recital in Vienna and was extremely successful. In 1830, at the age of 21, Poland was occupied by the Russian army after an uprising. Chopin was abroad when it happened and would never return to his beloved homeland. Chopin loved Poland so deeply that he used to carry around a bag which contained a handful of Polish soil. Chopin moved to France, where he conquered the world for good, building a career as a teacher, interpreter, and composer. Due to his poor health, at the age of 39, Chopin died in his apartment at Place Vendôme in Paris. His funeral ceremony was held at the Madeleine Church, and it darkened the City of Lights. Chopin had become a legend. Some of his Polish friends brought jars of Polish soil to cover his grave at Père Lachaise Cemetery, so that he could rest on Polish soil forever. According to his final wishes, his heart was removed, placed into a crystal urn, and taken to Warsaw by his sister. It remains there today, inside one of the pillars of the Holy Cross Church. In over 250 pieces composed by Frédéric Chopin, the piano always takes the leading role.
So, as you can tell, he kind of loved the piano, and I kind of love the piano. I actually play piano. So, his pieces are definitely, if you are a skilled pianist, you would be lucky to be able to play some of these, because you'll know. This is a really cool piece. I'm going to see if we'll have enough time to listen to most of it. Sorry about that. gonna go ahead and pause it. As you can tell, super talented, and a lot of the right hand and the left hand both have crazy parts, and a lot of times these type of composers will write like a harmony and melody, like the left hand usually carries the harmony parts, but this piece, no, it had its own. And then we're gonna go into the impromptu piece, which is also fantastic. No pun intended. I'm so sorry. So obviously we don't have enough time to watch all of his videos, but those are probably two of my favorite piano pieces by him. So going on to Schumann. This is interesting because Robert and Clara Schumann were a couple, and Schumann was a composer, but many of you have probably heard the name Brahms. He is also a composer, and we're going to be watching a video a little bit about the love triangle between the three of them. And we're not going to watch the whole thing, and it's probably a good thing because the video is kind of cringy, but I think it's funny. So we're going to watch a little bit about them. As you could tell, he was a mentor, so that's how they knew each other. Now, obviously, Brahms was not this old when he started mentoring him. The pictures are just not... They should have picked younger pictures. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit. You probably get the picture. So basically, long story short, poor Robert Schumann got the end of the stick, the short end of the stick, I should say. So you're probably like, why do we need to know this? Well, here's the thing. With a lot of these pieces, they wrote from an emotional point in their life, as where like Beethoven, since he was dealing with deafness, a lot of his pieces contained lots of minor sounding things, and so a lot of this music is very emotional, and you definitely could tell. Sometimes it's a little harder to hear, but knowing the background of their lives and then listening to the music, I feel like gives you a better insight. So that's kind of what I was trying to do with that video. And then this is just a little slower piece by Schumann. He wrote a lot of slower emotional pieces, and kind of like I said, because he went through an emotional time because Brahms stole his girl pretty much. And this piece is also from his work called Scenes from a Childhood. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. Okay, it's really slow, but honestly really beautiful at the same time. Scenes from Childhood. So he was definitely more of an emotional writer. So now that we kind of talked about that, we're gonna go over to Brahms, and he was very versatile, and he was a true romantic. A lot of his pieces he wrote for Clara, and unfortunately we don't have enough time to go into all of that, but he was obsessed with this girl. So I wish that we had more time because it's really interesting how music plays through people's lives and how some of these were literal love stories and very personal, but these are shared and have been shared to millions and millions of people over the last century. So this one, everyone knows this one. I don't even need to explain it. Don't fall asleep now. Okay. You get the gist. That is the iconic lullaby. And it's honestly very beautiful, and usually we have it dumbed down, and it's usually for little kids, but it's still a piece of work, you know. It's a musical masterpiece, and this is probably my favorite piece by Brahms because it's very upbeat, and I have a feeling a lot of you have heard this, but if you haven't, and this is the first time you're hearing it, hopefully you enjoy it. Pause it. I love that song, and it's super upbeat, and he has a lot more music like that, but those are just two that I wanted to highlight about Brahms. Now, these two people are not necessarily related in any way. I just wanted to stick them both onto one slide because their music is very iconic. Now, Tchaikovsky is our first guy on the left, and then Edward Grieg is on our right. Excuse me. It's allergy season, and recording this, I was really hoping I wouldn't sneeze, but that's fine. Continuing. So these are definitely easily identifiable pieces, and as you can see on here, we have the Nutcracker March and also the 1812 Overture, and you're probably like, what the heck is that? I don't even know what that is. And someone may know what it is, but as soon as I play it, you're going to understand it immediately. And then honestly, here's another piece from that kind of has to go with our Halloween theme. I always have to throw in one. In the Hall of the Mountain King, that's definitely his most famous piece. A lot of his other music you've probably never heard, and it's understandable because this one kind of outshines them all. But we're going to listen to the Nutcracker, and we're going to get a little bit of Christmas, even though Halloween's coming up. I'm going to pause it there. I'm sure everyone knows that song. And also, he is the composer of The Swan Lake as well. Super famous. And then we're going to listen to the 1812 Overture. This just gives a little bit more diversity to his compositions. And I'm actually going to fast forward it to the most famous part. Now, I'm hoping all of you have heard that one before, but if not, that piece requires them to light off, I want to say, maybe 16 different cannons. This piece required cannons. It is in the score for them to light cannons, and I think that is amazing. Just had to share that. And then we're going to go ahead and listen to In the Hall of the Mountain King, which is such a fun piece. All right, and then we have that. So there are two of Honestly, I wish I had more time to go over these because a lot of these people paved the way for others to be able to compose, and they were such out-of-the-box composers. And all of these people are obviously from different countries, and during that time, a lot of these countries were going through revolutionary phases in their parliament and different areas. So a lot of this music had to tie with government issues, and I think that's kind of interesting. And if you want to read up on that as well, there's so much to learn about music, and it's definitely more deeply rooted than we think sometimes. And then last but not least, we have Wagner, who was definitely an out-of-the-box composer. He also was more of a mythology composer. In this piece, you're going to be like, I have never heard of that, just reading it, Ride of the Valkyries. But as soon as I play it, you're going to know exactly what it is because it's used all the time in commercials. Sorry about that as well. We're almost done. All right, but you've heard of that one. So that's usually used in Triumphant, or I don't know if you've watched Looney Tunes, but that's also what they use for different parts. But that's probably one of his most iconic pieces, and it's actually part of a really big operatic composition. And if you are interested in listening to more, it's very visually entertaining. But other than that, we're just gonna go over a recap really quick. I know it was a lot, and this is so weird having to, listen to me, but if you're still listening and still entertained and still interested, even a little bit, I'm so proud of you guys, so thank you. So what to remember? Beethoven was part of both the classical and the Romantic era, so he, like I said before, wrote pieces for the classical era that had a lot of the classical things, such as the, I don't want to get to use too many big terms, but like a lot of the phrasing and a lot of different types of notes and things. You'll learn more about that. Well, those were specifically for classical era, as well as as in the Romantic era, he was definitely more freely written, and especially when he lost his hearing, he was fantastic. The Romantic era was not only consisted of music, but also art and literature, and that's really important to remember too, especially once you hit high school and you start taking literature classes. You'll notice how a lot of authors were part of the Romantic period, and honestly, it's really beautiful, and it's still probably one of my favorite eras. The Romantic era shows extreme diversity and passion, branching out from the styles and forms of the earlier eras. Music is expressive in the Romantic era, so people started showing their feelings and their thoughts and how they felt about certain positions and how they felt towards certain topics, and they showed that. And like I said, with Robert Schumann and Brahms, even in a love triangle, they still composed with their hearts. And instruments such as the piano and violin became a rite of passage in the Western Hemisphere. If you learned how to play the piano in a Western Hemisphere country such as Europe or Germany, you were almost guaranteed a rite of passage somewhere, because a lot of students, that's their way of that was their income making. and you were considered highly educated if you knew how to play those instruments, which still today, I feel like if you are able to play an instrument, people look at that as you are trying very hard to be disciplined and to have higher education. So now that I bored you enough today, hopefully you learned a little bit something about the Romantic era, and you can take that home, or just, go through and try to find pieces of your own that you like from the Romantic era. These were literally, I didn't even brush the surface. I tried my best, but we only have a certain amount of time. So thank you guys, and enjoy the rest of your day, and just stay safe and healthy.